Fantastic. It's working. Okay. So we've got two great panelists today. Roberta Johnson from the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance, and Norah Piehl, who's the Executive Director at the Boston Book Festival. And I'll be posing some questions as the moderator today. Today's agenda, just so you know what's coming up, we'll start with some quick announcements. We'll go into introductions of our panelists, and we'll talk a bit about audience engagement. What might that look like in the time of COVID? And then kind of how to get started on a very practical level, how to get started planning audience engagement activities, and then get into some tools that might be helpful for you and your festivals. And then we'll wrap up with a question and answer session. And in terms of the chat function, I would encourage you to actively use the chat function. Use it to amplify the discussion. If something resonates with you, if you have questions, please use the chat function during the panel portion, and we'll collect the questions that were put into the chat. And we'll use that to start off the question and answer session. There's a couple quick notes. It's helpful just to type in the letter Q for questions. That way, as I scroll through the chat, I know that's a question. And then if it's directed at someone in particular, please just note that, and that's helpful for us. And then just on the logistics side of things, I have two logistical things with Zoom here just to make it optimal for us. So I would encourage you to rename yourself with your name and your festival name. And to get to rename it yourself, you can right-click your cursor over the picture, over your own picture, or click on those three dots in your picture, and you can rename yourselves. Should be easy to do. Does anyone have any questions on that? Any clarifications? Should be pretty easy. And then this next Zoom logistics piece is a little more complicated. So we've got a 3-person panel, and one way to just kind of spotlight these folks is to use Zoom's features to turn off our video and get only those with an active video on. So if you go to your preferences, that's using like the Zoom menu, like up at the top left corner, like you would to save a document. You can go in there and find your preferences. Or you can go in, you can also find your preferences using, there's a video icon in the lower left corner, and there's a little caret next to it, and you can edit your video preferences. And you want to select hide non-video participants. And then once you've done that, you can turn off your video. And we should be able to see, once I turn off the screen share, only the 3 panelists. So we'll check on that. So turn off the screen share. And I think we've got most of the folks. It looks like Diane, you might just, I think all you need to do is probably just turn off your video or stop the video on your side of things. Fantastic. And now we've got our 3 panelists. Excellent. Oh, and I've got a couple folks just to admit here. Great. Fantastic. I think we've just added a couple folks.
Now you're gonna have to go through the whole process again. Oh, maybe not.
No.
Yep, here comes Donnabelle. Yeah.
Fantastic. Donnabelle?
And William.
And William. Fantastic. I think all we need is for Donnabelle and William. We're going to move into the panel section right now. And all you need to do is just click on stop your video. And that way, or Eric, sorry. And click on stop your video. And then we'll just have the 3 panelists up. And then we'll reactivate your videos during the Q&A session. Perfect. There we go. Great. Okay. So now we've got Norah and Roberta, both I think maybe on mute, but we'll unmute them soon. And we'll dive right on into introductions. So we'll start with Roberta. Roberta, you are the Vice President of Audience Engagement at the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance. And the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance is similar to Arts Boston, which the festival producers here are familiar with. But could you tell us, just as a way of introduction, kind of how you got into audience engagement, this kind of speciality?
So I have a very interesting just story in terms of weaving and evolving in and out of like arts and culture. I actually went to a Korean Performing Arts high school, and then I ended up going to college and studying law and art history. And then I worked in the criminal justice social work field for about 6 years after I graduated before transitioning back into arts management. But because I really enjoy kind of like human interactions and psychology and understanding people's motivations, it really fooled me to get into like arts and culture from that audience engagement perspective and working on how people engage with the arts, what the arts mean to them, and how that can be translated back to the organization to basically sustain them. And so I got my master's in arts administration from Drexel, and my thesis really focused on how culture-based organizations or culturally specific organizations diversify their audiences in the reverse. And my thesis was wrong. So I ended up writing my thesis in the negative because my thesis was saying that these organizations had a blueprint that will help the entire sector think about diversity and diversifying their audiences. And what I found was they didn't really have that type of blueprints, and they also were still struggling with some of the basic like audience engagement and participation issues that many other organizations have. And really their thought process about retention and their core audiences was really that personal element. If people have a personal connection to them, then they'll stay in the kind of audience pool of that organization. And I actually worked at the American Swedish Historical Museum in Philadelphia. And, you know, as I put them in this study, and she basically said, like, if you wouldn't have worked at the Swedish Museum, would you still be really interested in Swedish culture? Would you still be very much like a part of our kind of museum family? And I honestly was like, I don't know. That is a very good question. And I also did like a focus group, and I took people along the way. And I had a friend who lived in South Philly his entire life and never knew that museum existed. So it was also just very interesting to think about who's aware of you if you're in that same neighborhood, and how you're interacting with that organization. So I've just been really fascinated with audience engagement, which then turned into me coming to the Cultural Alliance, where we really focus on audience research, interactions from a behavioral and a data perspective. So I don't want to ramble on too much because you're going to hear me speak a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and toss it back over to you, Jonas.
Sounds good. We'll dive into a lot of detail shortly. Yeah, Norah, just as an introduction, maybe you could tell us about your work as the executive director of the Boston Book Festival, and maybe a little bit of background about the festival itself. That way, I think it'll help set the context for some of our other conversations.
Sure, absolutely. I can talk a little bit about myself. First, I've been with the Boston Book Festival since 2011. The festival itself started in 2009. I was actually hired as the communications director back in the day. And I should contextualize this. At that time, I was part of a staff of 2. So it was executive director and the communications director. Now we have a staff of 3. So I was, I was promoted to deputy director after a couple of years, and then executive director last year. So I am not really a marketing person. A lot of what I've learned sort of as on the job, as it were, but I think a lot of what we do as a festival with regards to audience engagement, and a lot of the challenges that we face in terms of audience engagement as a festival, I'm hoping will resonate with a lot of the other festivals here today. I did prepare a very, very short slide deck with some info about the Boston Book Festival, just for those of you who haven't had a chance to attend. Let's see if I can find it here. Here we go.
Yeah, I feel like festival producers are always wanting to know how other festivals are set up, so this is helpful.
Great. So I thought it would be fun to do sort of a by the numbers type of thing, comparing what last year, which was our biggest year ever, looked like, compared with what 2020 is likely to look like, given that part of our discussion today will be about how things have changed given our current situation. So the Boston Book Festival in 2019 took place over a full weekend. It was the first time we had done a full weekend. Previously, we had just been on a Saturday. And last year, the model that we used was we were on Saturday, October 19th in Copley Square, and then on Sunday in Nubian Square, also known as Dudley Square in Roxbury. We had a total of 37 venues where we were presenting programming, 141 sessions and events. All of them were totally free to attend, and about 350 presenters. One thing I should mention, just because it's a huge misconception when it comes to book festivals, we're not a book fair. So although there is sort of a sales component, and you'll see some pictures of that in a second, it's not really focused on, authors or publishers sitting behind a table just selling books. Our focus is really on the authors coming to present their work. So as part of a lecture, panel discussion, workshop, it sort of runs the reading, it runs the gamut, but it really is about presenting the work of authors and connecting them with readers. So we have a couple of authors here in this picture. In 2019, we estimate we had 30,000 attendees. I'm sure we're going to talk about data collection later, but our attendance estimates are exactly that, estimates. I can talk a little bit about how we do estimate those, but that was what we were estimating over the course of the 2 days. We use about 300 volunteers for the festival. We had about 75 exhibitors, again, in our outdoor street fair. That's probably the closest thing that we have to a quote unquote book fair. 7 musical acts. We work with Berklee College of Music largely to program a music stage outside. So we really want to have that sort of festive atmosphere that goes along with having a festival or a celebration. So this year, BBF 2020, very different. We've already made the announcement that we're moving online. So to make that possible, we're actually expanding our footprint. So we're going to be doing programming throughout the month of October from the 5th through the 25th. Our original weekend was going to be October 24th and 25th. So that's when a lot of our programming will be happening, but we'll be doing things in the afternoons and evenings leading up to that. We're shooting for 35 to 40 live streamed and pre-recorded sessions. Again, those will all be free, although we're going to be putting in some easy ways for them to donate and support the work that we do as part of attending those sessions. We'll probably max out about 120 presenters, so like about a third of what we had last year. A variety of formats and platforms. We're experimenting with podcasts, radio. We're working with the Globe on something. So lots of different ways to reach people, which I think is key. And as far as the number of attendees, that's the question I keep getting asked, and I really don't know what to expect. The few online programs we've done so far this spring have attracted anywhere from 150 to 450 people per session, which I think is pretty good. And it's hard to know whether people will sort of get tapped out with having that much programming coming from us during October, or if they'll get excited and if it will continue to build. But this is something we're all sort of figuring out as we go. So it's a big experiment. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that I think we'll probably talk about in more detail as we go. Some specific audience engagement efforts that we've conducted in the past. and then we can talk about what those might look like going forward. One of our biggest initiatives is this One City, One Story program, where we annually choose a single short story written by a Boston or New England author. We print 20,000 copies of that story in English and Spanish and hand them out around Boston. And then it culminates in a session at the book festival with the author. This is my kid handing out One City, One Story. And then another thing we've done in the last couple of years is called a Bbf Book Hunt. And what we do for this is we enlist volunteers or fans of the festival to pick up these book packages from our office or from our volunteer training sessions. Inside each package is a copy of a book by one of the book festival authors and a letter encouraging anybody who finds the book to attend the session with that author at the Boston Book Festival. The book's free for them to keep. We encourage volunteers to hide them all over the city and to post a photo on Instagram or Twitter and encourage people to go find them. So it's like a big book hide and go seek that takes place in the lead up to the festival. So we're currently looking about how that might work this year, but that's something else that we're hoping can continue in 2020. And then I wanted to touch on something specific that we've been doing that really gathered a lot of engagement this spring. And it was something that was purely circumstantial. And I think one of the things that I'm sure will come up during our conversation is about the need to sort of be flexible and responsive right now. And that's sort of what this program was all about. It's a program called At Home Boston, which we did as a partnership with the Boston Globe. Once lockdown started in March, we moved pretty quickly to start setting this up. We solicited micro essays, so 200 words or less, from people all over Greater Boston about what they were experiencing. We kept hearing from people that they felt very isolated and that it really helped them to read about what other people were going through. And so people really responded very positively to this. We got more than 400 submissions. It was really interesting to see as the spring and early summer progressed. We just wrapped this up at the end of June. As the spring and summer progressed, the submissions we got also evolved. So some of them, it started out with sort of being like, oh my gosh, I'm stuck in my house. And then as the George Floyd murder happened and Breonna Taylor and the Black Lives Matter protests and everybody's feelings about all of that, that started to come into the essays as well. And some of them were, talked about the intersections of everything happening at once. So that was really interesting to see that conversation progress. Many of these were posted on our social media and our website, a handful of them posted in the Globe, and then they're going to be archived as part of a national project with Northeastern and then a sort of conglomerate of national COVID archives. So that's an example of something that we wouldn't have ordinarily done, but it fits nicely with our mission and really did get some engagement from folks. So that's all from my slideshow, but hopefully gives you a little bit of an overview about what the festival typically looks like and some of the programs that we do.
Yeah, fantastic. I think we just added a couple folks, and for now, we're just asking folks just to stop their video, and that way we just get the 3 panelists. So I think, let's see here. So if you're able to, just stop your video. So fantastic, there we go. Great. So we've been talking a bit about audience engagement already, but I thought let's clear the air. Let's make sure that everybody knows what we're talking about. Let's start with Roberta and Norah. If you have additional insights, feel free to jump on in. But let's start with defining this term. What is audience engagement and how is that different from traditional marketing?
Oh, the loaded question.
Well, we get that in early, right?
Yes. Well, I don't know.
Oh, I think you just clicked mute again.
Oh, my bad. Zoom. So I don't know if you guys have been keeping track of when this term was introduced back in I want to say 2016. There were a lot of controversy about what actually is audience engagement and how that difference between audience development and engagement. And really, it comes down to participation. So my simplest definition of it is audience engagement is how people really interact with your content. And that could be a various ways. And not just limited to only ticket sales or attending your event. That is included in engagement, but there are people who actually never come to your events that engage with your content or with your organization by sharing that to other people who do come to your event. So there's various different levels of engagement, and you kind of have to start thinking about your audiences in different segments of who is like your advocate, who is your supporter, who is a person that is really wants to attend, but like can't attend for whatever reason in that barrier. So that's a further analysis of you figuring out, okay, what is that barrier to get that person to come actually to an event? But just because they're not coming doesn't mean that you don't have opportunities to engage them. You can engage them virtually, you can engage them on social media, you get them interactive. I really like Norah's like just example of the essays. And as we all kind of pivoted during COVID, we are really looking at just a higher engagement of people who being at home, who don't really have anything to do, and a creative outlet is to express yourself through art. And here in Philadelphia, there have been like a visual art kind of movement where there was a prompt that went out and everyone kind of did these pictures and put it in their window. So if you were outside walking, you can see this entire kind of city global mural about this particular topic. We also have a organization called First Person Arts that in the start of the COVID did the same thing, asking for these stories in spoken word and poems and videos of people sharing their experiences. And they've kind of done that throughout their website and their social media, sharing some of those stories. So I think those are not necessarily generating revenue in that traditional sense, but definitely generating engagement and people being more connected to your organization. So the way I think about engagement is it's more of the connection to your organization, is more of how people interact with you. And then I think about marketing in that traditional sense of you building more visibility and then basically looking at it from that return on investment of that visibility of how many people buy tickets, how many people actually attend that event. And that's how I really define like that traditional marketing aspect. Does that answer the question? Is that?
I think that's fantastic. I think that's fantastic. One thing I really enjoyed hearing about is just thinking about the different segments. I've seen kind of like the audience triangle where, you know, up at the top are the people who actually attend in person, but you've got lots and lots of fans below, and that large segmentation, or also kind of concentric circles where, you know, you've got your core audience, you've got,
Yeah.
you know, like
Actually, I like the circle better than just a triangle because I feel like we often pigeonhole people to stay in these boxes. And we ourselves as like just traditional arts administrators, we're always looking at our audience pathway into our organizations in a very linear way. And I feel like that is not the case anymore. People are not just like, oh, we come to your event and then we become subscribers or members and then we become donors. It doesn't work that way. Some people might intersect with your event just based off of being a donor because they like the work that you are doing, but never walk through your door. And like, how do you get them to walk through your door is another goal for that particular audience. So I like the idea of circles as opposed to that triangle and trying to move people away from thinking about their audience in that linear way. Some people are not going to go there. And I know millennials, and me being a millennial, has really thrown the entire concept of subscribers to donors upside on its head. And it's really about value. It's really about personal identity. Does this organization represent my personal beliefs and values? And it's a much more deeper connection than like, oh yeah, I like what you do and I'm going to subscribe and I'm going to do this. It's more or less, well, what are you doing? Does it really resonate with me? And is it worth my time? And a lot of our audience research that we have done at the Cultural Alliance and also like Art Boston has done some great research. It's really showing that cost is not a real barrier for millennials. Millennials will drop $200 on a night, but it has to be a spectacular, awesome night that includes an entire experience. So it's not just like, oh yeah, I spent $200 to go to the opera. It's like, I spent $200, I got a drink, I got to meet people, I got to interact, I also got a souvenir to take home, and then they told me to come back, and we did an Instagram thing. It's an experience, because honestly, we don't have that much money. And so we want good bang for our buck. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So there's that values piece, and yeah, and I love the idea of kind of not thinking about this stepwise logical promotion of involvement along the way. But yeah, it's this kind of messy area where you're interacting with your audiences in lots and lots of different ways. That's fantastic. Norah, did you have any additional thoughts about audience?
Yeah, well, I think I have one anecdote just sort of about audience engagement. It is actually, I think about this often from my very first Boston Book Festival that I was involved with as a staff person. I remember this was back when it was one day, and so at the end of that day, I was just completely exhausted. Those of you who run festivals know probably what I'm talking about. And my husband took me to a diner in Cambridge across the river, so quite a ways from where the geographic center of the festival is. And we sat in a booth, and as I was sitting there sort of like recovering, I overheard a conversation at a neighboring table with a couple of folks who were telling their friends about the great experience they had just had at the Boston Book Festival, and talking in detail about a conversation they had heard. It was a Civil War panel that they had attended. And that, more than anything else that I remember from that day, is something that like just has stuck with me as an example of like, that's what we're aspiring to. Like, we want to be the ones who are sort of sparking those conversations and turning people, like Roberta said, from attendees into advocates and supporters, whether that's with financial or just sort of spreading the word about the event. So that was something that I often keep in mind in trying to create those moments for people. And then the other thing, just sort of in terms of this year and how we're thinking about engagement and about those sort of segments of our subscriber base, especially for our newsletter, is that as you were saying, Roberta, this year especially, I think people are shifting around a lot. Almost every time we send out a newsletter right now, I hear back from people saying, oh gosh, I forwarded your newsletter to my friend in Texas who's always been interested, but now she's so excited that she can actually attend your events because they're going to be online this year. Or I'm hearing from people who say, I moved to Chicago 5 years ago. I still subscribe to your newsletter, but this year I can actually attend because I can tune in online. So I think this year that's a real opportunity to sort of shift some people around. And then the big challenge, of course, will be what does 2021 look like for keeping those people sort of in the fold, as it were.
That's right. We'll pull them back in with virtual programming, and then we'll see what happens with it the next time. That sounds fun. Well, let's talk about the big elephant in the room, because I feel as though COVID has really thrown us for a loop here. We're all festival producers. We're used to producing this huge in-person event. But how can we think about audience engagement in the time of COVID? What are some barriers and opportunities that you see at this time? Maybe we'll first start with Roberta and think about kind of online spaces, and then we'll cycle back to Norah, who's been thinking about those in real life spaces, and we'll go from there. So Roberta, maybe you can tell us a bit about online opportunities and barriers in this time.
Yeah, I can. I think Norah definitely set this up too, because as she was talking through, like, those new opportunities of reaching audiences that you've never reached before. And I think that's a really great like awakening almost for COVID-19, is that now you are catering to an audience that has been looking at you, but has not had the opportunity to interact with you, whether that's because of distance or from a basic level of accessibility, which I think that's also the barrier in this digital space as well, is we've kind of started to, and arts and culture has been really slow to addressing just physical accessibility. But like we've got to a point like in FY19, or I'm sorry, in 2019, I'm always talking in fiscal years, but in 2019, we were kind of starting to get there. We were starting to see a wave and change in people really thinking about their accessibility, their experience for people who have disabilities in their space. And now it's kind of like, oh, we've gone back to digital space, which before COVID, a lot of people who had disabilities, that's how they actually interacted with your content, with your organization, was through that digital landscape, which we didn't really invest much in at that time. And I feel like this time we do have much more content, but we're still not addressing some of those barriers in terms of access that we don't think about, whether that's closed captioning on your videos, audio description, thinking about texture when in terms of dance performances, how you can make that a little bit more descriptive from someone who is low vision, or impaired vision, or have hearing impairments, which are varying levels. So I think those are some of the barriers, but the opportunity is being able to reach people who are just far and wide, and thinking through your content a little bit. And right now it's Zoom fatigue. In the beginning of this, I think everybody was so craving something to do that our numbers were really high. And then everything is starting to kind of mellow out because people are like now getting really inundated with so much content, and it's all via Zoom. And we are on Zoom and WhatsApp app and Facebook, chatting to people like this is just our way of communicating. So you have to start thinking about length of time and attention span, and also like content, how to bring people in, and also giving people the opportunity to interact with each other. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to the Instagram like versus battles that have been going on. Particularly, I think Jill Scott and Erykah Badu's versus battle was like the highest rated thing on Instagram. And it was great. It was awesome. And I think people loved it for many different reasons. The camaraderie between the two artists, the ability to be able to look at it on Instagram, but it wasn't a platform they had to go to that or learn something new. And then also to chat with other people in that chat box to basically be able to have that shared experience. So it was kind of almost mimicking that concert feel, but in a digital landscape. And so you have to think about the experience that you want to present, and like little bursts of like these kind of schedules and these video contents, and then also even just prompts of people. I know like here in Philadelphia, we had the Wilma Theater that did like a prompt for like COVID, and basically asked people to submit either written poems or little 15-second videos, and then they kind of shared it just on their Instagram story. And it was just those things of engaging with that audience, letting them build content, but putting it into the context that works for your organization and your mission. And they've really been just continuously building upon that. So I hope that answers the question in terms of what are some of those barriers and those opportunities. I think the opportunity is that you can reach someone far and wide. Even us at the Cultural Alliance have experienced that with like our programming, seeing people who never come to our in-person events now being able to come because it's virtually online. And so my caution would be, I know that we all hope that we can go back and be in person, but let's not also negate that virtual element. We've had time to really build our virtual like skills. Everyone has kind of adapted to this. So there has to be a happy medium and mixture of both in-person experiences, but that virtual experience as well, to give you a broader reach in your audiences. I had someone who literally called in from London to be a part of that program because they were so excited, and they would have never been able to do that. So let's not shut that door because we've already opened that. And that's something to think about for, when we transition it into 2021. How do we retain these audiences that we have engaged and got them really invested in us? And we don't want to shut that door because now we can go back in person. So that's my cautionary tale.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it does seem like there's a lot of opportunity to expand your audience with online platforms. Yeah, these barriers of disability, accessibility is something that needs to be thought through ahead of time. I think it's also for people who produce live festivals, and maybe an internal barrier or a team barrier or a personal barrier to try to operate in these virtual spaces that you may not know or may not be as familiar with. But now's the time to experiment. I think everybody's experimenting these days, and seeing what has success and what you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, this is the time to experiment. I agree with you. And like we have a saying here, especially since all of this started, is don't let good be the enemy of perfect. And what you need to do is that you're going to constantly be shifting, because that's how rapidly the world works, especially in internet land. We all forget what time is. So you're just going to have to be constantly upgrading. So if it's good, put it out there, you can perfect it later. But as we are just artists, and we are, marketers, and we are running these organizations, we're very much focus on, no, it has to look this way, it has to feel this way, and we don't have time to sit there and make it nice and neat and fall in those edges. It's just not going to happen that way. So you need to go ahead and think through okay, this is good, and then we can perfect this over time when we have the ability to do that. So again, don't let good be the enemy of perfect. Sometimes it's good to just have content. It also shows your humanity too. Everybody is struggling during this time. No one is perfect. Look, I'm in my kitchen. We are all just in a space. I don't have children, but I definitely empathize with people who have children, and, understanding that dynamic of, I have to work, but there's a child here. and so just have to allow yourself to just have some grace of, you don't need to be polished. And actually is a turnoff for people to be that polished, especially when everybody else is struggling. So you kind of need to show your struggle to be more relatable. And I can definitely, we're going to share out some resources, and I'll share some resources that are really good about just thinking through from start to finish accessibility in your virtual programming. And the Chicago Cultural Consortium, Accessibility Consortium, actually has a great video that I'm going to share, and talking about, your digital and virtual programming from an accessibility standpoint, and specifically about closed captioning and audio description. There are ways that you can do it that are free. There are ways that you can do it that, of course, you pay a little bit more. And then also just offering resources. One of the things you have to think about is access to that information. So if you have accessibility on that platform, at least you can offer the alternative and say, hey, here's a list of stuff that you can use. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to provide that, but we want you to be able to experience it. And just that simple thing really resonates with people, saying, okay, you did think about me in mind. I wasn't an afterthought in this program.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's great. Fantastic. Norah, you have been thinking about in-person audience engagement a fair amount, and you kind of alluded to a couple programs that you've been thinking through, but tell us a little bit about your approach here.
Sure. So I can talk a little bit about One City, One Story specifically, which we're having to sort of really rethink this year. It's a program that is just beloved by our attendees. We actually had to put it on hiatus a couple years ago, and that was the #1 question that our info tent volunteers were fielding is, what happened to One City, One Story, and is it coming back? So in this year, when everything is sort of topsy-turvy, we were really committed to continuing this program as sort of, just something that people can count on. But we know that the distribution model and getting these stories in the hands of people and, is going to be much more challenging this year. In the past, we've used a model where we've had volunteers go to big public events and hand them out to people, or we've gone to tea stations here in Boston and handed them out to folks. And let's just say neither of those things are really a great source of interaction right now. And a lot of people are sort of suspicious of taking things from strangers at this point also. So we're really relying much more heavily, even than in the past, on our partners as far as getting these stories out in the hands of people. So for example, we've always worked with the Boston Public Library to have these stories available at all of their branches. This year, the stories will be available at all the branches that are open. And in the cases of branches where they still might just be doing the curbside pickup of your library items, they might drop a copy of One City, One Story into the bag along with the books that patrons are picking up. In general, we're printing fewer copies, which will help with our expenses quite a bit. But we're also really going to be foregrounding the availability of the stories online. In addition to printing the story in English and Spanish, we also we typeset it and post it on our website in several additional languages, including this year Tagalog, which is great because the author is a Filipina immigrant, and the story centers on that experience. That's really wonderful. And we're also doing an audio version of the story this year as well for people. We're really foregrounding audio this year in general in our programming. And so, yeah, we're really thinking through how can we partner with our existing partners and with new partners. Like this year, the Mayor's Office for Immigrant Advancement here in Boston is going to be working with us on promoting those different translations. We're going to be working with different schools that teach English as a second language to adults and encouraging them to adopt this story in their curriculum. So there's lots of different new ways, and that part of it is the exciting part about this year for me, at least, is some of these things we've been doing the same way or very similar way for years and years. And this year is a good example, or good opportunity for us to sort of step back, look at our existing processes, see what can be kept, what maybe shouldn't be kept. And then next year we can reevaluate again and see what that might look like. So that's sort of how we're thinking through everything this year, but One City, One Story is a particularly good example of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a good opportunity to kind of take stock of what you've been doing and what might work given the circumstances that we know about right now as we're planning towards festivals. So, the festivals who are on this call are typically spring and summer festivals. And so now is kind of a good opportunity for them to think big term planning about what they might do to engage audiences throughout the year, maybe building towards the in-person festival in spring, summer. Hopefully that'll work out, or just building, audience engagement in general with their organization. So, Norah, do you have a good schema about or words of advice maybe about how us as festival producers might think through how to get started with audience engagement, kind of on a strategy planning level?
Sure. I mean, I think for us, everything sort of starts with the programming. And that's been something that this year has also been a really exciting opportunity. Typically for us, we're confined to authors who either are based here in New England or who are authors who have a new book coming out in the fall and whose publishers have a big enough budget to send them to Boston, because we don't have a budget to pay for author travel. However, this year, things have just, broken wide open, and we can invite authors from anywhere. We've already done a program with an author from the UK. I'm this year involving a number of authors from the West Coast, a number of authors who are published by small presses who have zero budget, but they're doing really cool stuff. And so this is an opportunity for us to highlight their work in a way that we wouldn't ordinarily be able to do. So that's always sort of where we start. And, in addition to lining up great authors who maybe have their own platform and putting together interesting themes that we think will resonate with our audiences, we also put a lot of thought into the moderator or the host and what kind of platform they have and how they can work with us to help amplify what we're doing and connect with the audiences that they already have, and bring them to us and vice versa. So that's again a big part of our planning process. And one of the great things this year, as I mentioned, last year we did 140 separate programs. This year we're only doing 35 or 40. And in the past, when we've thought about reaching audiences with our program, we've thought about the festival as a whole largely. This year, we're really thinking about these things in terms of individual sessions or groups of sessions around a particular theme. And so we're thinking more strategically about how can we, mention that we've got a great set of sessions about activism, and who should we be connecting with specifically to let them know that this content's going to be coming their way in October. And so really thinking like sort of dividing the festival up a little bit more and thinking about it as in terms of individual sessions or sets of programming tracks, if you will, and thinking about those in a more thoughtful way, and how we can use that to bring greater attention to the festival as a whole. Heaven knows people aren't only interested in one thing. So if they come to us because we're doing a great session on the environment, but they happen to also be horror fiction fans and notice that we have a great horror panel on our schedule, maybe they'll stick around for that as well. So really trying to do more of that targeted outreach to interest groups, college classes. This year I do all of our kids and teen programming, and with the likelihood that a lot of people will be teaching from home again this year, reaching out to school districts, parents groups, saying that we have these great conversations with kids authors coming out. So a lot of those things are new this year, but it's a fun opportunity to think about how to promote those sort of smaller pieces of your festival rather than the festival as this big umbrella of a weekend.
There you go. Yeah. So, I love, of course, that, as we think about expanding our audiences, we can think about expanding our audience or our artists that we use, our authors that we're presenting at these sessions. I love that idea, of course. And then, thinking about kind of packaging events thematically, this expansion from one weekend to, what is it, a 3-week festival? Yeah. And spacing out the events so that it's not too much at once. And, you might encounter that Zoom fatigue if, every night this week, we're talking about activism or something. That's right. A little much, but you can space things out so it feels more manageable for your audiences. So different ways to strategize and think about repackaging the stuff that you already do and stuff that's central to your mission. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and going along with that too, we're also, and this is something that if any festivals do have archives or any past initiatives or programs that they've done, we're finding that this is a really great opportunity to say, hey, not only were we doing a great set of activism sessions this year, we also did activism sessions in 2017 and 2016, and here's links to the audio, and you can check that out now while you're waiting for this year's events. And so again, just trying to bring people in different ways, especially this year when people are looking for maybe new things to listen to or new ways to engage with topics that have been with us for a while, but maybe have come back to prominence now.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And like going back to kind of, old collateral events that you've done in the past. And, if you have recordings or if you have things to share from those events, it's a way to add on to the festival without adding on a whole brand new event. And expand on that. Okay. Well, I feel as though, we've been talking around a lot of different ideas, but we also wanted to get into the weeds a little bit and talk about different tools that festival producers might be able to use in this space. So it all sounds great. How do you actually do it? Now that we've got a big picture idea of what's going on, it's tough to do things that are new, especially on kind of limited resources. So I'll turn to Roberta for this one. What resources do you have to help us do this audience engagement work?
So my one advice is always try to keep things as simple and as possible. So like if you keep it simple and keep it focused, you're going to have a large return on that engagement. You can't put too much into something because people will get really confused and distracted. So to Nora's point, like that breakup and organizing it by theme allows people to really quickly understand what you're promoting to them, what you're providing them in the experience without having to really dig through. The worst you want people to do is dig through, figure out what it is that you're giving, and then get disinterested in it because they had to go through the dig to figure it out what it is. I'm going to share my screen to kind of give you guys also some practical things. One of the things that we're always, as small organizations, nonprofits, we don't have much marketing budget, let alone much design budget. So a great tool, and we're gonna try to do this. A great tool, can you see my screen okay? All right. So a great tool is Canva. Now Canva is free. Like its basic is free. However, if you're a nonprofit, you actually get to have the pro version for free. And it's also cheap too if you're not a nonprofit. I'm actually going to go ahead and log into my company's account. So just that way you can see like we use it ourselves. Sometimes we just don't have the fancy budget for certain items, or if we need something to be like really cool and quick to the point, we'll be able to create that. So here are some of the things that we have done for some of our organizations. I am logged in. Sorry, let me go back. This is giving me so much F. I know. This is how, all right, so then I don't want that then. Go down here. Let me go back here. All right, so I can't look at that one, but that's fine. What I can do is look at this guy. So this is kind of an email that we did showcasing for organizations and talking about our accessibility and diversity program. And so each of these organizations, they actually end up having a hyperlink. And so what we did is just create kind of a one image, being able to put text in it. It's very easy. You can basically create any type of design. So if you go here and create a design, you can create it with custom dimensions. So if you need it to fit somewhere, you can do that, or you can use a template that's already ready to go in that actual dimensions that you need it for, whether that's a Facebook cover, an Instagram post. It can be animated, some Facebook video, which you can upload and put content in. What I like about Canva is that you have the opportunity to upload images just right here, or it can be even from your own like brand content folder. And what things people have shared with you. And it could be your own logos, and you can upload that and just be able to quickly pop it in there, and it saves all of it. It also saves like different templates for you that you've worked on. And so as you guys have seen before, these are some of like our designs and some of our templates that we've done. Some of the things that we have just updated and able to kind of showcase, like what does this ad look like, what can give us a space that we can tweak a bit. So this has also been done with our organization, Asian Art Initiative, and they were doing International Women's Day, and so they had like a virtual programming because they actually moved a little bit earlier than a lot of people. So we did this kind of mock-up ad, which is an image that they provided, and just really simple text. It's a very simple thing, but it really is direct, right to the point, and gets people interest.
into what exactly it is. So that's just one tool, is the Canva tool, which I really enjoy. It's free, and if you're a nonprofit, it's very easy for you to reach out to them and they'll give you the pro version for free. But even the basic version is fine. Another good tool as far as content, when you're thinking about social media, and you know how there's like national days for, I think last month was actually National Disability Pride Month. And then Philadelphia had its own like Pride Week, and then the ADA had its own anniversary this past Sunday. So, where do people get all that information to know what celebrations? And these are content calendars. So if you're not familiar with Capacity Interactive, it's actually a really good tool to have, is their content calendar. Now, they've actually been putting out kind of COVID-related content calendars to remind you that it's not business as usual, and also to be mindful of what content you're putting out. What I like about this is they give you like, weekly celebrations, monthly celebrations, so you can figure out what content you have already that fits into that, and you can just tailor it and be able to be a part of hashtags to expand your reach and gain some awareness. They also have daily celebrations. They give you a little bit more context if you are struggling with like what that content looks like for each of those days. And then I really like the end, where it actually gives you a whole bunch of resources on stock images, which Unsplash is a really good one. We use that all the time, and these are free images that you get. Some of them are very low cost if you want to invest in like an image that you really want. These are also video editing, so it actually tells you how to cut things. Some of them are free, some of them are paid, but it gives you some of those actual things that you could use beyond just the content. Same thing here with their accessibility, with some of the writing and copy editing. It's such a good resource tool, and they do this now monthly. They used to do it on a quarterly basis, but because of COVID, they've actually been a little bit more specific about tailoring the messaging and what you should be focusing on. So this is just some ideas as far as, you can sign up and they'll send you an email to let you know when this calendar is ready. But I really enjoy like Capacity Interactive as far as content and ideas and how to repurpose your content.
Fantastic. So that was Canva, and then the Interactive's a company, and they have this newsletter that they send out.
Yeah, another good place is HubSpot too. HubSpot is kind of similar to Capacity Interactive, and HubSpot really gets into strategy and marketing more so than content. But they do have some great articles. It's good to have. Capacity Interactive also has a great podcast, so if you don't have time to read, you can listen to stuff to get some ideas. So I think it's really good to really look out for that. And yes, we are going to put all these resources that I'm throwing at you in a handout. So you don't worry, you don't have to memorize any of this. We will give this to you in a thank you follow-up email. Another thing is thinking about your social media platform. So again, when we're talking about capacity, and we're talking about, I myself only have a 3-person team, and that includes myself. And we have to really think about what actual social media channels work best for us in terms of engagement. And it really comes down to looking at your audience data. So for Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, they have good back-end analytics data on how people are interacting with you. And so if you have not a lot of followers on one of those social media platforms, and you're not getting that much like views, impressions, or even clicks, it really comes down to, is it worth investing my time in that platform? And honestly, it's not. And it's okay. You don't need to be on every platform. You don't need to be on every platform. You can, if Facebook is your Jimmy Jam, stick with Facebook. You don't need to be on Instagram because everybody else is on Instagram. It's really hard to build up that content for Instagram and that level of engagement. Right now, to be really good on Instagram, you need to have at least about 2 posts a day almost, and you need to also be interacting with stories, interacting with other people's content, resharing other people's content. That in itself is about 6 hours. And so, you don't really need to invest that much time in a platform that you don't have audience built up already for it, or your audience is just not receptive to your content already. But here's Twitter and here's Facebook that works better for you. You also need to think about your content. If you have more pictures, images, and videos, Instagram is probably a better platform for you than Twitter. And so Twitter is definitely for the more literary content. It's more about sharing your thoughts and opinions, but also interacting with people. So you have to think about your engagement level on Twitter versus Instagram versus Facebook. Facebook, of course, is the oldest of the two, but you also don't need to get on the fad of TikTok, Snapchat, and even Twitch and Twitch. I do agree with like meeting people where they are, but you don't need to be there if you don't have content that's relevant there, if you're not going to invest the time, or not even want to invest the time, but have the time to really see that audience growth and that engagement growth. So don't even go there. You don't need to go to the fad of TikTok. Boomerang is fine on Instagram. Do a little thing and you're good. And so it's all about just keeping it simple, thinking about your tools. And this is the time to really analyze, especially when we're talking about capacity, especially if we're talking about our marketing budgets are changing. This is the time to analyze, where can I do the best amount of engagement work? Where can I put most of my energy in that's going to give me that high audience growth and engagement, and potentially even translate that to tickets as we're getting back into in-person events. So this is a time to really think through that. Actually, I wanted to show you guys, I know I'm talking too long, but I wanted to show you guys how we do our data analytics here at the Cultural Alliance. I do think that, yes, there is a place for Google Analytics, which I do recommend that people do that Google Analytics training, just so you can understand what Google does in terms of your traffic, your flow, and how people are engaging. And then if you have the opportunity to have a Google Analytics grant, that can also increase your visibility on the search engine itself. But I'm not going to go down the data rabbit hole because I know that's a lot. Capacity Interactive has great kind of benchmark data as far as digital marketing for arts and cultural organizations specifically, just like data study reports. So it might be beneficial for you to look at that and be able to kind of deduce some strategies from that report that might work for your organization. But I do think that you need to analyze data. And what does that mean? That also means how people are interacting with you on social media, how they're interacting in your emails, how they're coming to your website, and how they're navigating on your website. So I'm just going to show you guys how we acquire our data here at the Cultural Alliance for our program, the Philly Fun Guide and Fun Saver program. So this is the sheet for that. It's a simple spreadsheet. It's actually a Google sheet. And basically what we do is we track it monthly, and we also do quarterly. And we meet on a monthly basis to discuss our analytics to see how the flow of our traffic is going. We also make notes on what's happening. And as you can see, March is completely blocked out in red because COVID. So just knowing like what happened, what's going on, and how that impacts our numbers. And then being able to see how our subscriber base continues to grow after COVID, being able to look at like our open rates, our sessions, like how much time people are spending on Facebook and on our social sessions and Twitter, and really figuring out how we're devoting our time to it. It's a simple spreadsheet, and you don't have to be as complicated as ours. Ours is complicated because we've been doing this since about 2013. And so we've added more things to it, but we've also subtracted things from it. So you really just need to figure out what is relevant data touch points for you. And really going back to those, we call them KPIs. We always hear this KPI, these key performance indicators, and what does that really mean? And so what that means for your organization is what your goal is in trying to obtain audiences and engage audiences. And really for us, my goal for the Philly Fun Guide and Fun Savers is to keep the flow of traffic, keep people's interest. So like I'm always looking at the flow of traffic. How are people getting to us? What are those acquisitions? What are those media partners that I need to invest in? And some I need to divest from because it's not working for me. It's not bringing the audience that I expect to come. And that's over time that you learn like what media channel works for you. Because I also believe that marketing is consistency over time in order for you to really see a return on investment. But as we see in COVID, you don't really have that much resources to spend in a market that you're probably not well built in already. So I'm actually going to tell you to go into the markets that you are already built in and then work a different angle that is a little bit more cost efficient for you at this time. And that could be social media. Social media is very cost efficient when it comes to promoting ads, setting up campaigns. Like Facebook will only spend basically how that ad performs. It won't spend your entire budget. So, you know, those are just ideas to think about in terms of tools and data and how data influences that. Another data set for us is, of course, retention. We're always looking at our subscriber-based retention. So we know that we get an average of like 2,000 new subscribers, but we're also losing like 1,000 subscribers too. So the hope is to try to lessen that loss, because like basically attrition in subscription based is just natural. That's just going to happen. Some people are just not going to be into your content. Some people will just move away and have no need for your content, or for whatever reason. But what you want to do is have more people subscribe and less people desubscribe. And you really just want to be able to retain. And so that is our thought process behind it. And for the past 2 years, we've went from like 105,000 subscribers to now 134,000 subscribers. So we've been able to grow and retain audience and interact with them, engage with them a little differently. One of the things that we're going to be experimenting with is just targeted emails and retargeting information, which again, that's a capacity set. But we've worked to that level. You do not need to do that in the beginning. You need to work towards that. And it's not a priority for you to do. You have to think about, is it a priority? Not really. For us, it's a little differently because our goals are a little different. Your goal is not going to be the same as other organizations either. And that's okay. As far as for festivals, I think what I've been seeing that's really been awesome here in Philadelphia, we had Untitled, which is like an African festival that usually happens in the summertime. And they had to really pivot very quickly to do virtual programming. And they actually did Untitled for an entire week. And they only did one programming like in the beginning each day. And then like towards that weekend, which we normally have in Untitled, they had multiple different things for you to engage in. They used both Zoom and YouTube as well as Facebook, and that was their 3 platforms that they used. It was simple. It basically served a purpose because it is a beloved festival in Philadelphia, and it was also like I think their 40th anniversary. So, you know, it gave them the reach that they needed. They had new audiences, and they were able to engage in other audiences. So just thinking through like the spaces where people interact. And they have a Facebook page. They do not have really an Instagram presence, so they didn't do Instagram. They did it on Facebook. So those are things that help you dictate those ideas of where should I showcase my content. So I'm sorry I talked too much, but I hope this was helpful.
I think that's great. Yeah, I think there's always going to be a lot of questions around what sort of platforms to use. And I think I love that message of keeping it simple, of, you know, trying to think through where your audience is and what sort of content you might be sharing. I feel like those 2 lenses by themselves like will lead you towards certain platforms. And of course, yeah, what platforms you're already comfortable with and engage in already, thinking about that. And I love this idea of kind of, you know, I'm gonna invite folks to go ahead and start your video up again, and we'll kind of convene the whole group as we tie things off. But just as folks are reoperating their video cameras, I just wanted to kind of underline this idea of a monthly or quarterly check-in to the data points that you have access to. So some of the platforms that you're using, maybe attendance at a few of your events in the past, and just checking in on that data and making sure you understand what that data means, and how it can help steer you in different directions moving forward with new initiatives. I think that makes a lot of sense, just to check in on that data. Well, I'd love to just open it up for any questions that you have for Norah or Roberta. We have some like fantastic examples of people who are doing really great work here. And, you know, I'd love to hear any questions here, or also love to hear if anything resonated with you, anything that you heard today felt good and something you might steal for your own festivals. Yeah, go ahead, Andy. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Yeah.
Jonas, is that for me?
Yeah.
Good. Roberta, great work with the disability. And great work, Audience Lab. And I want to say great work for Mass Culture, Lisa. Always thinking above and out of the box. So great. We did experiment because we're a disability foundation. And we did experiment when we realized we had to go virtual. And Jonas, before you came, when the other person that was there, we were thinking, and I think most of our festivals was thinking about how we're going to do it virtual. So we did a talent show, and we had any other one, Anne? Thanks. We did a virtual in terms of we brought in the sign language, and people were very impressed about it because the importance of being able to cater to that other community was vital, and also in line with our mission statement, which we are focused on children with disability. So we had to bring in the sign language so that would be more inclusive. How do you see the response from the audience with regards to that inclusion of sign languages and so forth on the presentations? That's one question, and then I'm just going to finish up with the other. We have decided to take our major event, which is the My Caribbean One World Expo, virtual, because we were back and forth with the city and we realized COVID not happening. So the team, we met as a team, and I'm so glad I'm on this discussion in terms of retaining the audience, how to capture the audience, and how to have a virtual online program that is attractive to the audience. Thank God we had worked on our data, so we've been tracking and keeping a bit of data. With the expo, we have like over 900 people who are already registered to attend the expo. So is how to convert them to watch, and also when we did that piggyback, the virtual Zoom talent show, we were able to get a hand on, okay, if we have a painter, how will they present it? So we were able to see how the painter would present their virtual Zoom presentation. And also we had a steel pan player, and that everything, I mean, it was beautiful. We captured a lot of these. What we've been doing is capturing them on our YouTube page. So we have most of our videos up on YouTube page where people can go back and look at it. But very great point in terms of how to retain the audience and capture, have that interaction. And also what we found too was how to capture donation towards our foundation from the virtual presentation. So thank you very much, Jonas and Roberta and Norah. Oh, Norah, just a point, please include Caribbean American books. We have a lot of authors.
There you go. Fantastic. I see a budding partnership already. So just a question kind of around how to do accessibility stuff. And then, yeah, I think it sounds like they're experimenting already with kind of different formats and different platforms for the expo that you're planning in October, right? So he's thinking actively about all of this stuff. So any suggestions from Roberta or Norah around accessibility stuff?
So I think your question was about how did the audience like kind of receive ASL visual interpretation on screen. I think it's fine. I don't think it, like anyone who's done it already, it's kind of imposed. Like as long as you are committed to it, no one's going to be upset that you have ASL. And especially if you let people know, hey, we're doing ASL, we have audio description. If you have any accessibility needs, please let us know, and we'll try to accommodate them as best as possible. What it really comes down to is platform. Using the right platform to be able to make sure that if you have an ASL interpreter, it's in the corner that you want it to be. I'm gonna tell you right now, Zoom is not great for accessibility. They do not have, like you have to use a third-party plugin in order to do audio caption. And even with that, the audio caption is actually sometimes hidden by the actual PowerPoint or whatever presentation you're using. So think a little bit differently when using Zoom. I would go with like a pre-recorded where you can kind of control where the audio description is. And the closed captioning is, and where people can be positioned. So if you're using Zoom, if that's the only platform you can use, think about possibly pre-recorded content, and that way you can stream it in Zoom and also stream it on YouTube. YouTube is great for closed captioning. It's not the best, but it is great for closed captioning. They do have it. You don't have to pay for it. There are some free plugins that you could use for Zoom, but majority of them that work really well are paid, unfortunately. As far as like ASL interpreters, I would say work with your local ASL organizations, and they usually have a person that can do all of these needs, and they really have adapted well to virtually and been doing it longer. So really reach out to them, and you're already an accessibility organization, so you have these contacts really easily, and you can reach out to them and give them advice. I say always bring people into the conversation early while you're strategizing and planning. Because that helps you think through, that also makes them feel like a genuine partner. And that's another thing that we forget in the virtual landscape is because we're so quickly moving on, we forget to bring people in, and then we ask them at the end and they kind of feel like, well, why didn't you talk to me earlier? Now I feel like you just want to use me for this, and you kind of do, but you don't want to go about it in that regard. You really want to have like a really good close working relationship, because they might think of things that you didn't even see or you didn't even consider. And so bring them early into the conversation, even creating like a small committee, especially for those big, larger events. We are going through that here at the Cultural Alliance, where we're thinking about our virtual annual meeting. I'm actually doing a pre-production call later on this afternoon, where we're really going to talk about what are the accessibility components, how we can get all of this recorded, because we know the limitations of certain platforms. So I hope that answers your question about just inclusiveness. I think more inclusion is great. Like, I have my preferred pronouns. I think that also just creates a space of inclusion, and no one's going to be upset about you incorporating more to basically include more people, to get your content to more people. No one's going to be like, oh, that was distraction. It's not really. And like, we've all like been in that age where we've seen just different things. So I hope that helps.
Absolutely. That's
Jonas, sorry, just one other thing that we looked at too. Sorry to interrupt. Just last thing, we found out that like we looked at online presentation, like the DJ Kali event, and we had a Jamaica Bounty Killer and Beanie Man event, and we looked at how they presented their stuff virtually, so that we can get an idea how to see how they presented it and how it worked on whatever platform they were using. So
Yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely. Looking at others and what other people are doing and and taking great ideas. I think that's a fantastic way to expand what you're thinking about. I think we have time for maybe like one other question, maybe two questions. If anyone else has one, go ahead and unmute yourself and you can pose it. Feel free. Anything else? There was a question from Diane on the chat. Are there free or less expensive alternatives to Dropbox to convert out Zoom meetings to YouTube? Diane, are you just looking at kind of like storage as you're kind of converting a Zoom meeting recording into a YouTube friendly file? Is that what
Well, well, I'm new to this like everybody else is.
Great. Mm-hmm.
But we've had some Zoom meetings, and at first in April when we had our first two, I had a free membership. I was able to take that out.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed that in order to convert the Zoom meetings to YouTube. There might be other ways to do it, but I'm new, so this is what I had to do. And then when we had subsequent meetings, other people have been able to do it for me because they have their own private Zoom meetings. But I think it's something like, it's almost $50 a month to subscribe to Dropbox. And we don't need it that much, and I think it's really expensive for what it does. So I'm just wondering, are there other ways of doing it? I'm like I said, very new to this, so maybe there are other ways, and I would love to know what they are.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Norah.
For yours, or Norah, are you going to take it? You can take it.
Sorry,
I can tell you what we do, which is, so as I mentioned, we have a lot of audio files that at this point. We use the Amazon Web Services simple storage system, which is very inexpensive for storing large media files like that. It's like, depending on how much you're storing on there, it's going to be $1 or $2 a month probably to store things. And it's easy to sort of keep them there indefinitely as an archive.
Well, then after that, are you able to download them or upload them into, you are able to upload them into YouTube?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to suggest, like, we don't use Dropbox for our videos. We actually use Google Drive. So when we download them from Zoom, we put them onto the Google Drive, and then we can upload them into YouTube. So that's the way that we use it. And Google Drive is free. And I think for nonprofits, I actually think you get an expansion on your storage for free. So you might want to look into that. But yeah, that's a way to upload from there. Any Zoom meetings are really in the MP4 format. So they're a pretty easy format because you can even take it directly from Zoom and put it directly on YouTube. So you don't have to go through like taking it out of Zoom and putting it in storage. You can just go directly into YouTube from it. Also, because I understand Zoom has that free account, which gives you 40 minutes, which is nothing to people. If you're looking for just an alternative, Google Meet is a good alternative, which does not have any limitation on time. You can record, and you can also upload that into YouTube and Facebook pretty seamlessly. There are videos online, which I'm a big component of YouTube because they make you feel like you can do anything. So definitely check out those resources.
Thank you. Could I ask a question?
Yeah.
If for instance, like when the meeting first started, Jonas started recording it, I noticed on my screen there is an option to record. So if I recorded this meeting, then I wouldn't have to have a Dropbox of a recording that somebody else sent to me. Is that right?
Yeah, it might record like directly onto your computer.
Okay, so that might eliminate the need for a Dropbox.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, Dropbox is really like it's like a hard drive that lives somewhere in the cloud, an internet accessible hard drive.
All new to me. Thank you.
Totally.
Good, Jonas, and that, I just want to respond to Dan. And what we have done with our Zoom account, we have it, the recording saved on the computer, and then what we do, we go into our YouTube account and we upload the file. So the file, that recording is uploaded to your YouTube, because Zoom allows you to either store it on the computer or store it on the cloud.
Yeah. Lots of small technique stuff, but yeah, I would say, you know, on some of these technical pieces, like feel free to email us and, and we might be able to kind of troubleshoot with you on some of these pieces based on.
Also, Diane, I wanted to offer, like, if you're getting people sending you videos that are through Dropbox, why don't you ask them to send it to you via Google Drive as opposed to Dropbox if that is the issue? That sounds like you are getting videos from other people that force you to open up Dropbox. And I do know that Dropbox is changing. It's weird. Like, they used to give it to you for free up to a certain degree, but then, like, if it's coming for someone who has a paid Dropbox, then you can't access it. It does some weird permission things. So try to get that person to send you that video not through Dropbox, but through Google Drive.
Okay.
And that might help negate you having to use Dropbox.
Thank you.
We're running low on time here. I just wanted to quickly follow up on Eric's question in the chat, which was about ticketing service. He wants the tickets to be free, but give them a chance to donate. So as an additional donation. So he's looking for just some platforms. If anybody has names of platforms, Athena mentioned Eventbrite. I've used brown paper tickets as well.
TicketLeap is also good for that as well. I don't know if TicketLeap is in your market, but
Say it again, Roberta.
TicketLeap. TicketLeap. Yep.
Okay.
But if Brown Paper Bag is better, they're also good. Eventbrite is also good for that, and they have a donation. You can do a suggested donation in parentheses, and that will help with those. But Eventbrite is really the best. There's nothing else there. Eventbrite will not take any fees off of your donations, but will take fees off of any ticketed items. So just an FYI to know, if you're trying to collect all of your donations and you want it to be a donation, do not do that ticketed event because they will take, I think it's like $3 and some change off of each ticket. So keeping that in mind.
There you go. So Eventbrite, brown paper tickets, and TicketLeap are ones to investigate that are out there. So,
Yeah, we use brown paper tickets sometimes. Yeah.
Lisa, yeah, great.
I just wanted to say thank you so much to Roberta and Norah, and to you too, Jonas, for this was amazing and incredible and so helpful. I'm excited to be able to share it with the rest of the folks and for it to be part of our toolkit going forward. As you know, we fund over 225 festivals, and we're going to share this with them as well. And you know, I liked what you said about you not being perfect. I mean, I myself run a festival, a big film festival here in Boston, and we've moved to October, and we've had to now go completely virtual, and we just keep stopping about, you know, putting up content and everything, because you're always, you know, you're right, you want it to be perfect. So I think we're all in that sort of like same boat, and it really helps, you know, to hear these sorts of things about, is there overkill and are people tired, and creating your own special space. And Norah, that great thing that I might steal, you know, from you about like the hunt, the scavenger hunt for things. I mean, for all of us, I think that's a really great way to sort of engage new folks in ways that we never really figured. I didn't even think about that before, but it's also something you can do during COVID, that people can go out and do that sort of stuff. So really appreciated all of that. So thank you for your time and bringing, you know, this great sort of workshop webinar to us today.
Yeah, thank you so much to Norah and Roberta. We're going to compile this recording, and Roberta's going to pull together a quick handout with some of the resources that she named off. And we'll probably send that out early next week. the Mass Cultural Council and Arts Boston, and we've been chatting back and forth about the program itself. Originally, you know, we had thought that there might be an August convening, but in the time of COVID, that's probably not happening. But we're gonna try to think about we're gonna have our own re-envisioning about what this event might look like, and get back to you likely late August, early September for another convening, and hopefully get the whole group back together. And then we're you're out. We want to hear back about kind of your spring and summer activities and what you've been doing, and we'll probably do like a festival or an audience lab culminating survey, or, you know, we'll gather some information from you all about the experience, and then what happened during the spring and summer, how we made adjustments so that we may be able to better understand this time for you. Thank you again for everybody and your time this morning. We really appreciate it. Hope this has been helpful, and you'll hear back from us soon about other things. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care.
Thank you. Bye, Lisa.